more about this with CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein. He's also senior editor for The Atlantic. Also with me, international security analyst Jim Walsh. Good to see both of you. So, Jim, you first. Kim Jong-un is often just trying to get attention. What is this missile test saying to you, along with the timing while the Japanese Prime Minister Abe is in the U.S.?
Well, Fred, let's start with the second one first. You're absolutely right to point to the timing. As was pointed out by Matt, these tests happen on a fairly regular basis these days, but it's hard to imagine that this didn't have something to do with Prime Minister Abe visiting Mr. Trump. I'm sure he was able to get 2 for 1, and whatever media value he has is sort of doubled by timing it now. Now, as to the missile test itself, they're going to continue to do these, and Mr. Trump is going to deal with the very difficult, they even said, complicated reality. There aren't a lot of powerful policy tools here that you can force the North Koreans to stop testing. So that's going to be a challenge going forward. But I am encouraged. This went a little differently than one might have expected. The North Koreans did not rush out and say, we're going to test an ICBM. So they pulled back the reins a little bit. And the spokespeople in the White House today, they also sort of responded in a more measured way, with a little less bluster and a little less, tendency to acting rashly. So both sides, ironically, are sort of playing it a little as she goes to test each other out.
So in your view, it was wise that President Trump had very little to say?
I think so. When you don't have a lot of great options in your hand, it's probably better to say less rather than more. He did the same thing that every president has done under these circumstances. He's sought to reassure our allies. That's the best thing you can do. But, let's say there was reference today about building up the military. Well, that's going to take years and years, and it's really not going to have an impact on the current problem, which is sort of staring us in the face. So if you don't have a lot of good options, maybe brevity is the order of the day.
So Ron, President Trump did reassure Japan, but he didn't reassure, or at least verbally, South Korea. Was this a missed opportunity?
It was a somewhat strange statement in that way, in that it never mentioned North Korea, didn't reassure South Korea, and kind of adds to the questions surrounding the National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, who is facing a whole other series of questions based on his contacts with Russia during the transition and whether he misled the vice president about the nature of that as well as the country. So yes, I think it was a strange statement, but it is a reflection of the difficulty. I mean, you see, and this is one thing that is really a bipartisan or nonpartisan. Every newly elected president comes in saying that he's either going to be tougher or smarter and thus make more progress against intractable problems than his predecessor. And they come in, and there's a reason why the predecessor was not able to make more progress. And one other dynamic here is that if there is a point of leverage on North Korea, it is from China. And we saw President Trump promising a much tougher posture toward China, which he kind of continued even through the transition. But in his conversation with President Xi this week, he did back off his threat to reassess the one China policy. And one reason I think you cannot get into a full-scale confrontation with China is because you do need their help in trying to establish any kind of boundaries on North Korea.
So Jim, South Korea's military leaders are still claiming to be analyzing, the data,
yes.
Claiming it did appear to be, in their view, a medium-range missile. But there's some concern that they may be getting closer to being able to, fire or come closer to have a missile with a greater range. Is that your concern, too?
Well, I'm going to say something weird or different than most people say on this. I'm puzzled by this focus on their getting closer or further away from an intercontinental ballistic missile that could hit the U.S. It seems to me that both understates the threat and overstates it at the same time. It overstates it because, in my personal professional assessment, they are a long way off. That's a really tough thing to do. It's not the same thing.
When you say long way off, as in years?
Yes,
months?
Yes, it's years. The other thing about it, though, is that it also sort of understates the threat because we only focus on a missile that could potentially reach the U.S. homeland. Why do I say that? We have more than 20,000 troops, American troops, in South Korea. Thousands more in Japan. They are our treaty ally. If they are attacked with a nuclear weapon, we are legally and morally obliged to treat it as if it was an attack upon the United States. And my gosh, if we had tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers killed in that attack, that would certainly be, we would consider that an attack on the U.S. So that day has already arrived. Just because they can't lob a missile all the way over here doesn't mean that the threat is real, and it involves Americans, and it involves allies that are have been foundational to U.S. foreign policy.
And gentlemen, last hour I spoke with former Energy Secretary and Ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, and these were his concerns.
So let's be sure that, one, we reduce our nuclear weapons. Yes, we should modernize them. Keep an eye on Russia. That's the main issue, and that worries me, the too close ties of the Trump administration with Russia. But remember that North Korea, the nuclear agreement with Iran, are in your portfolio. So watch and get briefed and find the best experts to lead us into strong negotiations with North Korea, which hopefully would reduce or eliminate their nuclear weapons, and Iran so that they keep the nuclear agreement. And with Russia, don't let them forget that they're an important ally when it comes to nuclear weapons, and they have not lived up to their side of the bargain.
Ron, in your view, would this be top of mind for this Trump administration?
Look, yeah, look, I mean, like I said, every president has struggled to deal with this, and the options are not great in North Korea. The military options don't seem to be there. The negotiation options are limited and require certainly pressure from China. One thing we never discuss in the U.S. political system is whether ultimately some form of deterrence may have to be the answer with North Korea, some combination of missile defense and deterrence, which is essentially what we have relied on against a much bigger threat from Russia for a long period of time. But this is a problem that has confounded president after president because, as is often the case in foreign policy, there is not a great option. There's only kind of least unacceptable options.
And Jim, are there deterrents?
Well, I think we're actually exercising deterrence right now. In previous tests, you will have noticed that the U.S. has flown nuclear-capable aircraft over the peninsula, and sent ships. And I think all the military exercises we do with South Korea and the visit by General Mattis to South Korea, this is all meant at deterrent signaling to say to North Korea, don't cross the line. So I think we're already doing that. I do think Ron's absolutely right that China is pivotal here. There's no solving this problem unless China's on board. And we do have some common interests, not identical interests, but common interests. And we need to be able to talk to them so that we can try to get our arms around this problem. And it will have to include negotiations. The signals I've received from North Koreans at various times is that they were willing to turn the page on President Obama and treat Mr. Trump differently depending on how he treated them. Now, is that true? I don't know. But there has to be some discussions with the parties at some point, or we're just going to keep on doing more of the same old thing over and over again.
All right, Jim Walsh, Ron Brownstein, always good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
All right.